Top 10 video for the post-classical era, top 10 events. The first event is the construction of the Grand Canal. It was built by conscripted labor, which is a new form of labor in this period. And its construction affected the trade between Vietnam and China so that a new form of rice was introduced to China. It's champa rice, and it's a quick ripening rice, which kind of increased their agricultural productivity and the surplus of food that they had, which led to an increase in population and urbanization because people moved to cities more because that's where the trade was taking place, and there was more population that could move to cities. The second one is the development of credit systems like checks and credit and paper money, and that increased trade because it made it easier for people to trade with each other because they would all have the same type of currency and they wouldn't only have to rely on barter or have different types of currencies. The third is the Bantu migration, and it was when Bantu people moved from the Sahara Desert, or like just under the Sahara Desert, and they moved all throughout sub-Saharan Africa, and they spread their iron workings. They spread what crops they had, like sorghum and citrus and bananas. And they also spread their language, which also combined with Arabic to make Swahili. So that was kind of just their impact on sub-Saharan Africa. The next are the Polynesian migrations, and it was when the Polynesian people moved throughout the Pacific Islands, and they spread lots of agricultural products and techniques, and they also spread animals. So like they took animals from their homeland and brought them throughout the islands. The next is the Little Ice Age, which comes later, and that affected agriculture at that time. It actually decreased agriculture because if the temperature was lower and their farming was a bit messed up, and they had a decrease in surplus, which led to a decrease in population and urbanization. And then the next is the spread of the plague throughout Europe and Asia and everywhere, especially by the Mongols and by trade because they had an increase in trade through trade routes. So an increase in contact with people. And the plague also decreased population because it killed a lot of people. And it decreased urbanization in that way, especially since in cities the plague was more likely to spread because there were so many people in cities and they were all like passing it between each other, and so a lot of people were killed, especially in cities. The next would be the death of Muhammad. So in Islam, two branches were created from the death of Muhammad because they didn't know, they were like, he was the leader of Islam, and they didn't know after his death who was going to be the leader of Islam. And it created the Sunnis and the Shia Muslims, and one branch believed that it was someone of his bloodline that should be able to take his place instead of just the next religious leader, which caused, once again, the rift between the Sunnis and the Shias. And then the next would be the Crusades, because when the Christian people, they want to take their homeland back from the people that they considered infidels that were populating it at that time, and they decided to have a quest to take that back. And basically it was mostly pointless and killed a lot of people and really impacted the relationship between Christianity and those other religions. But it also brought more cross-cultural contact and increased trade and like the spread of ideas and goods at that time. The next, the top 10 people in this time period, the first one are groups. Top 10 people are groups in this time period. The first one is the Mongols, and they were a large group of nomadic people, and they conquered a lot of land at this time period, and they had the largest land empire at this time. They were led by the next person, Genghis Khan, and he was a fairly brutal leader. He also had a lot of children who went on to become his successors and had a lot of he was a lot of people's ancestor. He was the leader of the Mongols, and he kind of created how big their empire was, just because he was brutal and he had so many brutal conquests and just led them that way. The Mongols increased trade because trade and cross-cultural contact, because they took over so many regions and they spread a lot of things from region to region, and they spread different technologies from China, like the printing press and gunpowder and things like that. They also protected trade under them because they thought it was really important. Like they had to have like a messaging system, and they had to have trade within their empire, and so they protected that. The next would be the Hanseatic League, which isn't exactly a group of people. It's more like a union, so it's sort of a group of people, but they protected trade at this time, and they increased trade because they protected the workers in trade. The next important people are Ibn Battuta and Marco Polo, and they were both travelers at that time, and they recorded a lot of their travels, so we have a lot of knowledge from them, even if some of it is with bias. But yeah, that's how they recorded their information about other empires and other states at this time. The next person is Muhammad, because he developed the religion of Islam, which is really big at this time. He was a prophet from God, and he thought he received messages from God, and he created the new religion based on this, who worships Allah, which is God in Arabic. At this time, Islam increased trade and spread Arabic and spread it, and its religion. Islam spread a lot. Basically, Islam spread and increased trade because Muhammad was a merchant and he was the founder of this religion, so he would have wanted to protect merchants. So trade was done through merchants a lot, and he wanted to protect trade. It also spread the language of Arabic, which combined with the Bantu language to create Swahili, and that was important to that culture. Okay, the next important person is the Pope. He was the leader of the Catholic religion, and at this time the schism happened, which divided Eastern Orthodoxy with Roman Catholicism, and that it divided people between those religions. And the Pope was important at this time because he was the leader of the Roman Catholic religion and part of why the schism happened. The next person is Mansa Musa, and he was of the Mali Empire, and he made a famous pilgrimage to Mecca where he handed out. Oh, he was really, 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 really rich, and on his pilgrimage to Mecca, he gave out a lot of gold and actually decreased the value of gold because everyone had gold, and but he was still really, really rich. Anyways, the next person is Justinian, and he was of the Byzantine Empire. So Justinian was from the Byzantine Empire, and he was the emperor. And he basically, the big thing that he did was his law code. He had all of the laws rewritten, and he added judges' opinions. So like it was sort of like our judiciary system today. Like he'd know the judges' opinions on everything, and he had a big law code. His wife was also very important. Her name was Theodora. She fought for the rights of women in the Byzantine Empire, and she was a cool girl. She was cool because she just was really advocating for the rights of women, and they eventually got some more rights. She also kind of just proved that women could rule, or at least assist in ruling, since she did assist Justinian with ruling, especially through the Nika revolts, where the green and blue factions were against each other, and she helped to put a stop to that. Next are the top 10 social, political, or cultural factors in this time, and the first one is Islam, because that was a big religion, and it was a new religion, inspired actually by the old religions that were also in this time. But they affected trade, as discussed before. language, as also discussed before, and just the culture of many people because it was a new religion and a lot of people were following it. And yeah. The next one is the Crusades, which was once again the Christian quest for their Holy Land, and it spread Christianity a lot, and it also spread ideas and goods throughout that time period. Also with that is Christianity, which is another factor because it spread through Europe, and also the Great Schism, what happened, which was talked about before, and Christianity, because that was a religion, and a lot of people followed that, and it affected them religiously. Next is Buddhism, which was a religion based on the Buddha and his teachings. So monks, which also gave a female, like an opportunity to females to have a monastic lifestyle. So like they could become nuns along with Christianity and stuff. They could become nuns, and yeah, they could lead monastic lifestyles. And then with Buddhism, same thing. They could lead monastic lifestyles. But Buddhism spread throughout China at this time period, and then China, when it conquered other states and made them tributary states, it would go through those states and change through that. So things like Zen Buddhism occurred. And then the next thing, which is Neo-Confucianism, that was when Buddhism mixed with Confucianism and formed sort of a different way of thinking, and it was more accepted in those regions to where it spread. Because in China, Confucianism was the main philosophy that was followed, and Buddhism was persecuted sometimes and just mainly shunned and wasn't accepted. But when it combined with Neo-Confucianism, it was slightly more accepted. The next one is Hinduism, which actually changed slightly because of Islam. It changed in its caste systems, but that was still big in India at this time period. And the next one is, again, we have the Bantu and Polynesian migrations because they spread their culture throughout Africa, and then Polynesian migration throughout the Pacific Islands. And then the next one would be feudalism because that developed and occurred in Europe and Japan at this time period, which it's the organization of labor through basically the giving out of land, and then it's organized by social class. So each social class would give and receive something from another, like the king would give the nobles land, and the nobles would give the king their army and their loyalty. Then the nobles would give the knights some land to farm in like a manor, and then the knights would give the nobles their service, so they would make up the army. Then the knights would give land to the peasants or the serfs to farm for them, so they would farm the manors and work the manors for them in exchange for like being able to live on the manors and basically an indentured servitude. So they would kind of take care of them. In Japan, it was the same thing, but the titles were changed. Like the king was the emperor, and there were samurais and things like that. Like just basically the names were changed, and it was slightly different just because of like where it was and what was going on. And then the last one is the spread of luxury goods. So like porcelain and things like silk and other luxury goods were more spread at this time. Which was partly because of trade routes and partly influenced by trade routes, because trade routes made it easier to trade things like that, and also it was more people, like higher class people, would want like fancier things and things that would show their wealth and things that they could afford. So they wanted higher class things, like higher, more fancy things like porcelain and things like that to say that they were wealthy and that just because they could. And that's the top 10 video.